We're still, it seems like we're trickling in, but let's get going. Thank you. So this is the Westside Planning Committee meeting for January 10th, 2017. It is 5:10 or so in the afternoon. We are in room 310, which is the city conference room at 351 West Center Street, Provo, Utah. We are being recorded, and we will begin with, well, before that, I just would like to welcome everyone to this year's version of the Westside Planning Committee. Hope everyone had some wonderful holidays. And so with that, we will start with our roll call with Mr. Herbert.
Terry Herbert.
LaDon Christians.
Kay Van Buren.
Beth Halliday.
Phil Crouch.
Elizabeth Hamilton.
David Harding.
Gary Winterton. Bill Holterstrom.
Dave Connect.
Sarah McNamara.
David Day.
Let's go ahead and grab our visitors as well.
My name is Benjamin Allen.
Becky Bogdan.
Welcome to everyone. So we are going to jump back into our discussion about policies that we want to recommend as soon as we approve the minutes. I think the minutes are all good. Those minutes were placed on the public site, public access site, thank you, along with the agenda. And so I will look for a motion to, well, first I'll look for any changes to the minutes. Seeing none, I will look for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Holsterstrom, and any second on that motion? Mr. Van Buren, all in favor? And any opposed? That was unanimous. All right, thank you. All right, so we will jump back into discussing policies that we would like to recommend to the council. We should note the absence of community development. So we will be discussing these things without their input today. Over the break, I think 3 or so different emails were sent to the committee. I'm not certain. I don't believe I received any responses whatsoever. So I'm just crossing my fingers that you guys received those. I'm getting some nods of the head. Excellent. Hopefully you had a chance to look over them. I thought we could begin just by reviewing them together. That way we can discuss if anything really stood out to us. Hopefully everyone read it, so we're not going to go through it in fine detail, but maybe we could just kind of refresh ourselves as well as if anything that stands out. So I wanted to begin with Mr. Connect's review. He pulled excerpts out of the general plan as well as Vision 20, the draft 2050. Just everything that pertains to agriculture and
growth on the west side.
And growth on the west side in Provo. Do we have, does that mouse reach? Or?
Yeah, that mouse will reach, or if you want to use this.
Start with the mouse.
Save the pointer too.
Okay, excellent. So, there we go. Starting in chapter 6, which addresses the city as a whole. And so, land use talks about the reason for land use ordinances, the purpose.
So, I have a comment.
Yeah, please, jump in.
So, if I was to add a word, I would say to plan for sufficient land for residential, industrial, commercial, but somewhere in there add agricultural. By default, you might say agricultural might show up in the third one, which is preserve important natural resources and sensitive lands. So in this particular part of the plan, or the general plan, it doesn't talk specifically about agriculture, but it does later on. And it talks about how important it is, but somehow it's just kind of overlooked here.
Okay. I think redoing the general plan is probably beyond the scope of the committee at the moment, but that's duly noted. City must balance demands for development of privately owned land and cost efficiency in meeting the needs of developed land for water, sewer, storm drain, flood protection, fire protection, services that are provided by the city.
And it does talk about,
It's right there. Yeah.
at the very end, it talks about agriculture in that paragraph.
Wow.
Infill development.
Infill development may be more timely and appropriate in comparison to developing new areas and converting agricultural lands to new residential development in order to provide for local growth of the bill. Thank you. Logical growth of the built environment and control of cost to taxpayers for expansion of municipal services. This is a really dense paragraph that really talks about a lot of the principles and sustainable growth principles, and I think it's very relevant to what we're discussing from the west side. And I'm not getting too deep into the details. Does anyone want to highlight anything as we kind of scroll through it?
The next statement about the
Natural boundary.
FEMA floodplain.
Yeah. And so we have discussed what the flood, the boundary is in the past when this was written, and also a potential update to that.
Right before that, what it says is the natural boundary to urban growth on the west side corresponds roughly with that floodplain line. My question, I posed this question to Mr. Connect last week, was, does that mean the old plan, FEMA plan, or the new one?
So,
This was written years ago, way before anyone conceived of.
Well, I understand, but the reason why I asked that question is because if the purpose of this statement was to say there is a floodplain line that you should not build beyond, and FEMA comes out and says, okay, this entire area is now floodplain, you have to have flood insurance, you're not supposed to build beyond this, is that what we're going to take into consideration?
It's a good question, but I personally would stick with this definition. The other is highly restrictive and I would say, some would say not justified.
Some people would say it is justified, because we're going to be forcing people to buy flood insurance in the foreseeable future, so why would we?
They're choosing to buy flood insurance. We're not forcing.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. The FEMA plan is changing, so they will now be living in a floodplain, which the federal government has come out and said you must buy flood insurance. And they can choose. I live in Florida, we have to buy hurricane insurance.
So as,
I'm sorry, I think this discussion is kind of
Okay.
appropriate, because
yeah.
if this is something we're going to discuss and actually move forward on, that means most of the west side is going to be off limits.
so for discussion purposes, this originally was meant, and still, in my opinion, is meant until we change the definition to a broader definition. It's just the meander line that, historically we understand to be a problem, or where the water comes up to for farming and development purposes.
Legislative intent was that line.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
and
the FEMA definition of the flood zone,
the old FEMA,
The
the
old.
current FEMA.
current, I'm sorry, current, not the one coming, the current. Okay, because,
and then the one other thing I would kind of throw in is that, FEMA says that this is where you shouldn't build beyond. What they say is, this is the line beyond you need to pay by flood insurance. FEMA didn't say no one should live in Florida. They said if you live in Florida, you should buy hurricane
Or
insurance.
mitigate it.
Right, right. And so, I'm going to throw out a question on this. Is it the committee's would the committee generally agree that the Lakeview Parkway roughly corresponds with the current FEMA?
that's not where the line is.
Okay,
Do you remember the maps?
generally, yeah.
That line goes up pretty far on the north side of the parkway.
In spots it does.
In spots it does, yep. And I guess it depends on how broadly
How broadly do, that's
it's
why the question.
when it says, you know, roughly or
So
spots.
I think you can find consensus that no one's arguing for development. No one's arguing for development outside of that road, right? So we have consensus as a minimum there. The disagreement, if there is some, is
Is it
whether,
a clarifying
is
question?
further within that spot. But I think there is unanimity that no one here is implying or recommending development south of that line.
And that we should be sensitive and aware, I agree, and we should be sensitive and aware to potential flood areas that are north of the river.
So I just keep trying, I'm trying to keep trying to point.
I'm not making a
Yeah.
decision, I'm just asking a
Yeah.
clarifying question, because this is a policy choice that will define kind of the rest of where it
So
goes.
you're making a point, so are we, in a sense, we're basically having a chance here to modify the FEMA definition to the roadway definition.
If
Well,
that's what
Is,
you want.
is,
So FEMA didn't say anything about urban growth boundary.
right,
We chose as a city at one point to say that is the line in the sand. And as we review this, we can see how much sense that makes as we go over this. So
yeah.
I'd just move on and keep it noted.
Okay.
I have a question. Does flooding affect roads? Like, if that were to flood, what would it do to the road that's placed now?
It's public works. I have my opinion, but
The elevation of the Lakeview Parkway is 2 foot above the flood stage of the lake.
So water can't like cut into it or
It
damage
would
it?
go under the culverts. We'd probably try to stop that from happening, but
The road wasn't designed for a dike, was it?
it's not a dike, but we would utilize it as best we could,
if it's to serve that purpose for.
yeah.
Okay. Other question is if a person buys property, where is it written for them, it sits in a floodplain?
That's usually in a title report, isn't it, Kay? I think when they get that property that says that it is, and then you can't build usually in something like that. I know that whenever in our area, down below, certain homes are in a floodplain, close to the river there, and those are usually done in a title report.
And your mortgage company certainly checks it before your mortgage company's gonna check it, your bank's gonna check it, your insurance company's gonna check it.
Then they won't let you make a mistake.
Yeah.
So I didn't know, just so I know, well, like, when you bought your house, did you know it was in a
No.
floodplain?
Absolutely not. Period.
But
Nobody knows
technically-
when they go in there until you get in there and you get involved in this.
Well, technically, under the old lines, your house isn't in the flood.
But we still do have issues with,
I'm not saying you don't have issues, I'm saying technically it's not in the floodplain. That's why that didn't pick up on
and
that.
still in those areas, they are so marshy. Even the proposed subdivision that they want to build down the street, he said there's areas where he cannot physically build, and that's north of the road. And the road is not Army Corps of Engineers certified for a dike.
Right. So when we say in a floodplain, we should probably be a little more precise in our language. So we could say in a federally designated floodplain, because how well that corresponds to actual floodplains and things.
And I do think that we actually built in the river.
Bottom of the floodplain.
Right. And yeah, we build in a federally designated floodplain.
Yeah.
And steps have to be taken to mitigate that, including insurance and higher premiums and things like that.
So rather than talk about FEMA, which is, I think, confusing.
policy.
Yeah, but we may want to change that if we feel strongly about the development and the concept, and just, instead of using FEMA, go with the meander line.
Okay.
Right, is that?
The meander line is becoming an antiquated term. I would use something else.
Would you?
If you want this to have long-term meaningfulness.
Okay.
To me, it's the road.
Maybe an elevation or define a boundary, but the meander meander line has become a term that very few people understand, and the records are no longer really reflecting that.
Is compromised line, is that a more up-to-date term, and is it equal to meander line?
The compromise line.
Yes, I think,
I certainly-
yeah, compromise is an elevation.
Yes.
How does underwater, like groundwater, is there, you buy a house, will it tell you, like, do you guys have to have pumps?
Some of them in my neighborhood do. They pump 3,000 gallons of water per day out of their house.
I just didn't know how, if a person buying a home is aware that, you know, groundwater is high.
Not currently, no. The one man that currently tracks how much he's pumping, he didn't know till after he bought the home, and he went downstairs in the crawl space because he couldn't figure out why. Anyway, he was down there and that's when he saw his pump. He was upset that he didn't disclose that before he bought it.
Does that need to be disclosed to people buying in this area?
It would be nice, I don't know how you mandate that.
How do we disclose it though?
It's on sellers, it's on seller's property condition disclosures. So it would be
As long as Utah
on the
Lake
seller
is, as
to
long as
disclose
Utah
that
Lake is there,
information.
the elevation of the lake is going to dictate the elevation of the groundwater. And we found that, I worked for the stormwater pros for 35 years. And we got called a number of times down there because homes in Becky's area had water underneath the home and also in the turn off, turn on water box. So we went down there, tested it, there was no chlorine in the water. So we shot the elevation of Utah Lake, we shot the elevation of the water in the box, and they were both the same, identical. Because it's just infiltration through the ground, unless you put a dam in there or something with a Hypalon cover, you're not gonna stop that infiltration. And this lake goes up and goes down. And we were told at the time that anything south of the meander line is controlled by the state, and not necessarily by just a line saying, okay, well, we just want to get on the other side of that line. Because once you get beyond the meander line, then you're on your own.
I think as we do these definitions, though, we're talking about lake water and we're talking about groundwater. I mean,
They're both the same in some instances.
but not always. We built a development in Grandview Hill, and 4 houses. We had a house all framed, and we came one morning, and there was 20 inches of water in the basement. We had no idea. And then there's 4 or 5 houses that all had to do with irrigation, and there was a spring that nobody at the farm would kind of, all of a sudden, it found a way to work, and, you know, then we had 4 houses that put pumps in right there in the middle of sandy, gravelly, rocky Grandview. And then down the river bottoms, same thing, number of houses down there had to have pumps. So, as we talk about how do we, I think we have to restrain what we're doing to this area and not try to define our policy on groundwater citywide, you know, because it's got a whole bunch of different causes and reasons.
I wanted to confirm, the current FEMA plan is 1988 standard, is that correct? Okay. So I wonder if maybe some of this language should include that specific date so that there's less confusion if we do adopt a different FEMA plan down the line.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion. I do want to pull us back out of the details a little bit and talk about policies. So one policy we might look at is defining the road as the boundary line with the idea that, with the understanding that there are areas north of the road that may need to be, we need to consider groundwater and potential flood impact.
Well, I think case point is that's true anywhere you can have that issue. So it doesn't need a specific, necessarily specifically addressing because it can happen anywhere. Yeah, and areas lots of funds.
But there are areas in here we need to be sensitive to the fact that it's
I think
high
the
groundwater.
possibilities are more. In our pasture, you dig down a foot and there's water.
But I'm just saying, you've got pumps at the temple, you've got pumps at the hospital, you got pumps, I mean, it's far more common than we know.
My original clarifying question was actually a policy question.
Okay.
Because the policy that is stated on the plan is the FEMA floodline, you don't build beyond. So if we change that policy to the road line, that's the policy question I was asking.
Okay.
Exactly. So, for now, why don't we move on, because we're aware that there's still a debate to be had.
I'm just asking a policy question.
Yeah.
Mr. Day?
But one other consideration is that in our practice of building permits that we approve, the minimum finished floor elevation is 4496. And
And how does that relate to the compromise?
so that's a foot above.
Foot above. Okay.
And so, you know, that gives us, if we get to flood stage, the home is still okay because the habitable floor is a foot above that flood area. So what's happening in those lower lying areas, like these developments that are down below that, they bring in fill and lift it up the grade of the surrounding land around the homes.
Hi,
Okay, so I propose that we go on to the next document, and then any time that we want to refer back to the excerpts that Mr. Knecht pulled out, that we can flip back to those. This is a document, we took it from what community development had put together. I think it was last time or maybe 2 times ago that we first looked at it. They had nothing in for open space / agricultural preservation. They did have things about commercial
Residential.
and residential. Residential and commercial were the 2 that they had there. So Mr. Knecht and I said, well, okay, let's see if we can move this forward a little bit quicker. Let's actually put some proposed policies together and see if the committee can say, yeah, we like that, no, we don't like that, or we can't agree on that one, and see where it puts us. It'd be better if how do I zoom this?
That's what I was trying to figure out. 2 control plus. This is Google, whatever the. Yeah.
There's that percent right there.
So, I guess first let's look at this proposed purpose, and this kind of builds off of, I think it was the last time that we found some pretty good consensus around this. So the purpose is to support farmers to be able to work the land as long as they desire, and enable smart, sustainable, qualitative development if and when they choose to stop. And again, there's a lot of wordsmithing that could go on, we could polish it up, but as far as principles that are contained in there.
Is this just for agriculture?
No, this is a proposal for basically the purpose of the policies we're recommending to the council.
So maybe in terms of where you're at then, before you get down to the details, conceptually, is this something everybody is willing to support?
The first
Just
paragraph
the
there.
first paragraph.
It sounds to me, it's what we've been saying around, almost without any dissent the whole time.
I would like to add open space to that.
I think that's down on the, a little further down in the same document.
I think quality of development would include open space, and it's listed in the document.
As long as it's listed.
Okay. Now that's a good point. And you know, and someone could say, well, hey, I really think commercial is an important thing. But I think this is kind of a good umbrella, and thank you for pointing that out. Quality of development probably includes.
And I see your hand illustrations here. This policy is where, you say this is
overarching.
This is overarching of the entire West Side plan. This is the overarching theme. That seems to be a very high spot for me on that. I understand the concept, but to me, that's overly emphasizing agriculture if you're saying it's the top principle. Well, that's why I'm just trying to understand what you're saying.
And I don't understand the word support exactly. We ran into that with solar. And I want to know what that means as we talk a little bit more about that.
So it was kind of news to me as we had these discussions when community development mentioned something like, well, you know, if it's going to be our city's policy to, agricultural preservation is going to be part of our policy, then we're going to need to, continue to lease water. And I didn't know that that was something that hadn't planned on continuing or that had already been scaled back. And so, so for me, that's something, supporting the farmers would be things like policies like we will continue to lease water as long as they want to farm, or at least, I don't think we can buy in future, but it's the intent that we will continue to lease water and do things that will
And provide access.
provide access and those kind of things for as long as while the farmer still wants to use the land.
So let me share this. The section 1408 or chapter 1408 of the general plan, talking about the agricultural zone, says the purpose is the agricultural zone is established to provide areas in which agricultural pursuits can be encouraged and supported within the municipality. The A1 zone is designed to and intended to protect agricultural uses from encroachment of urban development until such time as residential, commercial, or industrial uses in such areas becomes necessary and desirable. Uses permitted in the A1 zone, in addition to agricultural uses, must be incidental thereto and should not change the basic agricultural character of the zone. Conversion of this agricultural zone to zones allowing urban uses should be accomplished in an orderly and progressive manner with no leapfrog encroachments of such uses or developments into the agricultural area. That's just the purpose and objections. It's already laid out in the general plan. And what I'm hearing is a desire to continue that, but what you've also got in there is that idea that they can work the land as long as they desire. And so, given the word support, I don't have a problem with the definition. I think most people would like to understand in a purpose that support is generally to aid and abet, if you will, and then the details of that would be down below.
And if I could then respond to and you probably have all seen it. Sometimes I like to debate, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing, I'm just exploring. To me, I see what you're saying, like, wow, if this is the overarching thing, I'm almost all, it's all focused on farmers or agricultural land. And I think that's somewhat of a recognition that that's the character of most, or much of the land that we're talking about. And what we're talking about is both supporting the agriculture, supporting the farmers while they want to farm, but then also a main part is how does that land get converted? Very similar to what was just read as the agricultural zone. We're looking for that logical, I forget what the terms, and I think that this is captured in it, and it makes it clear that we're not pushing people out, but we are planning for when that land is going to be converted, we make sure that it gets developed into quality residential areas.
My only question, and mostly question, it depends where it goes in the hierarchy, because if I was, there are how many landowners that do agriculture, I've got how many dozens, whatever there were, versus the rest of the residents. I would hate to have a plan that you're saying somehow that these landowners' voice is more important and their priorities is more important than the other. And so I'm just trying to think of it. And if I was trying to live in some of the neighborhoods, I would think, my property, my housing stock's not being maintained. Gee, I need a quality development next door to increase my quality of my housing stock. I would worry about the overemphasis of that. It's a balancing act, but I'm worried that we're overbalancing on one side versus the other.
My original thought left me, but I would just follow up that when I asked my constituents about this, it came back very strongly, regardless of where they lived in my district, and most of them live on the other side of the freeway, on the east side. They were like, oh my gosh, yeah, we got to do something. It's very valuable to them, whether they buy something at the farmer's market or go down to the corn maze or just go down there to enjoy. They felt, in my opinion, as strongly about agriculture on the west side as we have seen people feel about Rock Canyon, preserving Rock Canyon. And there's only a few people that really live close to it and see it on an everyday basis, but the rest of the community felt like, oh yeah, it's a community asset.
Does anyone, I mean, even just ballpark, anyone guess I mean, we have, 3 different farmers markets that take place in Provo. Any guesses on what percentage of the produce that's sold in farmers markets is grown in Provo?
It's not just Provo. When I walked through the farmer's market this past fall, we had people coming down from Oregon, people coming from Springville. They're just there to sell their produce, but it's a place that they just.
Yeah.
I think it's a very small percentage.
That's
And I go every week.
Steps do.
Do you guys,
30.
less than 30%, 30%, even
I
less?
bet you're even talking 10 to 15%.
And it depends on time of the year.
During the
Yeah.
season,
Yeah.
because
A lot of
there's different growing periods, like fall fruit.
And that's why when it comes to agriculture in general, for me, I see the whole Utah County as my agricultural home, and not just the west side. So it's a balancing act, the whole idea of sustainability, of survival, et cetera. I look at a broader geographic area in my simple mind, but then I have a very simple mind, so.
I'm trying to see, Dave, help me, somewhere about preserving the heritage of agriculture in Provo. So I'm just wondering, why do we have to be one or the other? Meaning, if we're not agricultural, then we're going to develop it. But just, I tried to pull the article. Alpine recently, their city council tried to, as I recall, move from, they have 1 house per 2 acres. Oh, was it Highland?
Yeah.
And that's why I couldn't find it in my
All
Google.
the same up there, gang, yeah.
But they love that, and they love that heritage. I was gonna propose, let's go 1 house per 2 acres, because that would keep green space. And, not the whole place,
I
but,
don't think that would preserve agriculture.
well, it would preserve a heritage of open space
It would preserve
and
heritage.
greenness.
I have to admit, this is where I'm having a problem with agricultural preservation. Talking to farmers, the last dairy farm in Provo just got rid of their entire herd. They're done. And none of their kids wanted to take it over. So is this planned for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 20, or the next 50 years? Because if it's a 50-year plan, I would probably say no to agricultural preservation and say yes to open space. Because let the farmers do what they want to do as long as they want to do it, but their kids aren't going to want to do it. And even if their kids do it, their grandkids aren't going to want to do it. And eventually, so I'd like to see provisions in there that, I like ag preservation, don't get me wrong, but I'd also like to see provisions in there for open space preservation.
So when it stops being a farm, it doesn't necessarily get developed.
Exactly.
And that takes money. That takes either easements or land trusts or
Parks,
selling development rights.
but if it's an ag preservation, can it be turned into a park?
But Beth, you're hitting where I think there's been absolute unanimity in this group, is open space. I think there's, and I growing up where I grew up next to the orange groves, which I loved, but a few years later it was next to a regional park, which thousands of people were able to love. And it really is an interesting trade-off through all of those things.
So does doing transfer of development rights allow for something like that to progress?
Well, if you did the transfer of development rights and preclude the development, and it kind of keeps it in agricultural uses, whether that could then transfer in becoming a park, it depends maybe on how you worded the whole legal definitions involved. But right now, if we just keep it on the higher level, I like that statement. I think it's consistent with what we've been talking about with the agricultural zone, and
As long as they want to, and they get support from the city.
To me, it's support open space, and one way of doing that is support agriculture.
Thank you.
That's what I
That's.
And I think I just want, the hierarchy matters, I think, in this discussion.
We haven't even talked about what agriculture means. I don't get that. I understand open space, but I don't understand agriculture.
Allowing people, okay, so one thing out, again, this is Lakeview North, but in my neighborhood, the animal rights are slowly being taken away. So people can't
have their animals that they want to have even. And so, for me, animal rights is a very important thing for people to preserve, and that's an agricultural aspect. So if people want to buy 4 10,000 square foot lots, have 1 acre and have a horse limit, they should have the right to do that. But when you change it from an agricultural zone to a residential zone, you lose all that.
Okay, so let's for now just, there seems to be mostly support for this one question, question of how high level, how overarching it should be, and that's fine, we'll note that. Let's jump into these. Dave, do you, Mr. Knick, would you like to?
Sure. So, preserve our agricultural heritage and support agriculture. I think the first thing we can and should do is recognize the Provo Agricultural Commission that has been meeting for how many months now going on?
I don't know, 3, 4?
Quite a while, and they have not been officially recognized by the city council. They were kind of established with the help of the mayor's office and Don Jarvis, but to be official, they need to be recognized by the city council as a real commission. So if we're serious about helping those in the business, I think this is the best way to show that and just make it official.
Yeah. And what do you have in mind with that meeting? Do we write a proclamation, vote on it, and recognize it, or what?
Cliff, we have other commissions that are in our code. Right, Cliff? Sorry? We have other commissions that are in our code. So if we created just like, the arts council's in the code.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, it would be codified as a commission.
The decision-making body, what?
A recommending body.
It's a recommending body, like the Arts Council or the Transportation and the
Planning
Mobility. The Planning Commission is a little different. That's state. The state gives it its mission, and then we would, in essence, kind of offload or ask this commission to look at things. And this would be look at what's impeding the success of current and prospective farmers. And look at some different things. And so that would be one of their tasks, to explore tools for agricultural preservation, looking at all these different tools. So we don't have to weigh in on which of these tools make the most sense. We could load that onto the Agricultural Commission to look into that.
Would they kind of be the advocates for the farmers and
Oh, yeah.
go to the farmers and teach them the things that they can do?
They are chomping at the bit, I would say. Do you want to summarize some of the discussions? It seems like...
I'm just saying, when things come before the planning commission that they want to do, would the agricultural commission be notified saying that this area within your purview is looking to develop, and what do you have to say?
That's a possibility, but right now they're looking to be recognized so that they can actually go out there as an official body and help and support and work with the farmers market, work with the farmers that do want to stay in business, and that whether that be growing things or animal rights.
Dave, I'm struggling with this because I don't know what they can do. I mean, we've talked about this for years and years and years, and I have not seen anything come forward because every farmer wants to come back and say, well, I want to farm it until I don't. And I don't know what we're getting.
I'm not sure that's incompatible with what the commission, the commission
Why?
would do. The commission would say,
What would be
okay,
the purpose of the commission? Help me understand the purpose. I need some,
Goes
what
right
are
back to
you
that.
calling for that?
Well, back it up for a second, so go up a little bit. You're talking, okay, so the purpose is there, right? The creation of a Provo Agricultural Commission, and the purpose is to support local commercial, non-commercial agriculture. And how you do it is by doing B, doing C.
I want to know B and C. What are B? Okay, work to remove obstacles. They have no authority to remove
No,
obstacles.
but they could, but, so the wordsmithing on that would give them the, help identify ways to remove obstacles and make recommendations, that kind of thing.
And then this is recommended to the council, so the council would work with the agricultural commission. So, one second, so, right now I'm hearing, hey, we were working the land outside of the parkway and now we've lost access to it. Or we're struggling with water or whatever. And right now, as we've seen, there's a lack of trust between some of these farmers and the city government. Whereas if we have a commission that are people that the farmers trust, that people that the city government trusts, they can kind of go as an in-between and say, hey, this is an actual problem, and here's some ideas on how we might address it. And it's kind of a go-between that can kind of problem solve and see if we can find solutions that work for all parties. This is how I see it.
It's like,
for B.
why do you have an arts council? To promote and advocate the arts. So it would just promote and advocate agriculture. I hear in Orem that now that they've lost virtually all of their agriculture, they're kind of waking up.
Okay, sorry.
That's what I was saying. That's why my question was, are these the people that are advocating for the farmers? Because the farmers don't come down here. So they would be going to them and then a go-between between the city and them.
And that's how I foresee this.
And to maybe gain the trust of the farmers, because right now I don't think the farmers trust Pueblo City.
Don't you have farmers on the commission?
Yes.
That is probably your best, some city people and a couple two or three farmers.
Yes.
So I think ultimately the specifics of an agricultural commission could be worked out later. Just, I think in terms of where you want to go with this is, this committee needs to propose policies for the area plan, and this would be one that you're saying up top that you want to promote and support agriculture, and this is just one step. And the specifics of it can be worked out by the time you put it into legislation at the council level anyway. You probably, if I were drafting this, I would probably make B and C a subset of A as part of the as part of the instructions to the Agriculture Commission as to what they're to do.
Terry, I believe in this, and 95% of this does not apply to the area ground that we're talking about.
You said Utah County.
I know, and Utah County goes clear down to Salem and Payson and Alberta, and that's what this is mostly talking about.
Except we spent $60,000. We spent the majority of the money to produce that.
It went through us. Well, it went through us.
Nonetheless, we didn't have to.
And there's a lot of provisions in there, including developing in a compact manner so that we can maintain open spaces. So there's, which probably doesn't agree with 2 acres per unit. I mean, so there's
There's a minimum.
There's a lot of ideas in there.
I would almost say put A through G under A and kind of say we
Those are all
support everything for the Agricultural Commission
to work on
this. And as a policy, we're just looking at policies because this is not in our purview at all. This is something, if you guys prove it, that's what they get to do.
I think these are policies that we would recommend to the council.
I understand, but it would, for me, all of that would go under A. So all of those things, because we personally, this committee is not going to go out and encourage productivity of agricultural land. We're not going to go to the state lawmakers and ask them to add anything.
Right.
We're just.
But we would recommend to the council that the council do these things.
Yeah, but under the Agricultural Commission. So I'm just saying all of that kind of collapses down. Those are all good points, but they all kind of collapse under and down. We recommend an Agricultural Commission to the council.
But for example, the council would establish a Provo City Farmland Trust Fund.
Oh, okay, well that one, sorry.
So my
Mostly all
question
of
to you,
them.
is there anything in that, is there anything in those statements that would be a deal breaker if you were to vote on this as a recommendation?
Question, Dave, just what you just said. If there's a fund that's established, you're saying the council will establish that fund? See, I don't know about it.
So again, so this would be a recommendation.
Why wouldn't the commission establish that fund? If the council, how does that come into budget? And I mean, it seemed like that gets, I don't know. I'm just struggling because we're comparing it to an arts council. Well, an arts council doesn't have to do with land. It doesn't take or give land. It doesn't restrict
It
use
makes
of land.
recommendations on policy.
Right, but it's,
It does deal with a lot of money.
So I could imagine the Arts Council coming to the municipal council and saying, we think that with some of your RAP money, we recommend that you create this program or this fund for this thing. And then the council then gets to decide whether they heed that advice, and perhaps they create that fund, perhaps they don't. And so I see that as similar, that we would recommend, and all of these are just proposals, but the idea is that we would be recommending to the council that they would establish a trust fund. I see what you're saying, because this could, instead of being necessarily taxpayers' money, this could be just community donated funds.
more like donated money, and more than
And this says right
city
there,
funds. I don't know, just-
it says, contributed and donated, kind of like they did for the Covey Center.
Well, that's fine, I'm just trying to understand, because it's been referred to differently
Yeah.
twice in this meeting just right now, as we're trying to understand it, so I'm trying to,
When the Covey Center had private donations to it, did the city control that fund, or was that? And yeah, thank you. We're probably we're down to the weeds too much, but no, these are good. These are good comments, and I think let's move on. But all of these are being noted, and we'll flesh that out some more. But the idea is. And maybe that is something that could be brought through the Agricultural Commission.
And I might suggest to you that, you've got to kind of think what the audience is. Part of this is recommendation to council, and part of this is direction to our community development folks to draft the document with the policies. So I would say certainly that F and G are something that would be a recommendation to council that you wouldn't be putting as part of the Southwest Area Plan. So when we go draft it, write this up before the committee's finished its work at some point, maybe we pull F and G out and say, these are additional recommendations that this committee's making to council, is a thought.
Let me play with that a little bit. Just my vision of this is we were going to be proposing policies to the council, then the council would look at these and decide which ones they want to basically direct community development to.
We should probably clarify that. I think we've been working on the assumption, community development's working on the assumption that we are helping community development, this group is helping community development come up with a plan just like they would if it was a different committee. And usually what community development does is it creates its own committee and works through the Southwest, the various plan, and then brings it back to the Planning Commission and Council. And given that it was stalled, this was created specially to help move it along. And so I think it's safe to assume that you're still operating under this. You are the committee for the planning side of it, and then what you guys come out with will be the recommendation that comes through the council.
Yeah. Let's see if we can clarify that from both sides.
Makes a lot of sense to go through the professional, and it also standardizes the plans around the city, so.
But the way I saw it though is that there was a committee and community development was struggling because they wanted to know what is the council's policy? What direction from the council? And so then the council said, well, let's put this together. And my understanding was this committee was going to recommend to the council, and then the council could decide, okay, this is the policy that we want.
Well, let me clarify that.
So
But in the meantime, at the end of the day, you're still looking at making some recommendations to somebody.
Okay, you're right.
And so I'd say just move on through that, and we'll clarify the specifics of that.
Okay. Section 2, and I think we kept this to just 2 levels of hierarchy, and that's because that's how these plans, these master plans have been created so far. But we can format differently the contents of what I really want to focus on. So 2 is create quality usable open space. And here, actually, these are not so much policies as just areas to consider. Natural areas, examples of which are the Provo River, the River Delta, the Lakeshore, wetlands, essentially.
Would change it, sorry, I don't know the whole, how the whole system works. Would changing this to a policy mean that is what is going forward and that is what's going to be, or is this just kind of a, we'd like to see this?
Well, so it's changing, right now, this is just, these are things that should be considered. Changing it to policy might be, these are the things we expect to see, or these are the things this is our vision for the west side.
I'd like to change that to policy.
Okay? I didn't even do anything, I just moved the mouse.
Touch it, that's all.
Ah! Okay. So that would look,
Go up with this.
but I actually want to be down there. That's what I said. I just moved the mouse, I didn't. Okay, so that might look like something like.
I'm pretty sure the Provo River, River Delta, Lake Shore wetlands and boardwalks are kind of already in the plan, aren't they?
Okay, so.
I don't know, I don't know
Are
that
you
you need to
talking
change
about
it. I think the concept is there,
Okay.
right? You put it up there and you support it, whatever the right word is, wordsmith, I wouldn't get too caught up in that.
Okay, well then.
You're just saying,
we're gonna have-
we want this.
So the general agreement is these are things that we want to support and protect. Okay? Developed parks, so these can be neighborhood parks, a regional sports park, something that has been discussed. Provo Beach is an idea of and again, that's more of an implementation of like what we might do with the lake shore that came from Maine. But these are things we support. Agritourism, I don't know if that's spelled right, but agritourism, examples of that, we have a corn maze in Provo. Salt Lake County runs a county park called Wheeler Farm. I don't know how many people are familiar with that.
Thanksgiving Point Farm.
Thanksgiving Point Farm is another, I haven't been there, but that sounds like another example. Young Living Farm, again, I haven't been there, but I've seen advertisements for it. And I think that's more of a functioning farm, where Wheeler Farm, I don't know how functioning it is, but I mean, that kind of gives you an idea of what that might be. Community/school gardens might be another way of kind of using land there that's agricultural but is public as well and brings people in and gives them experiences. This is another type, and again, this is why I'm saying this is more of a listing rather than necessarily a policy of these are things we support, but agricultural fields can be argued as open space.
Is that meant to be, is that meaning farms, ranches, that kind of stuff? Pasture, pretty open, pastures?
Right, and that's, and what my personal position on this is I think some of these other things that can be interacted with more with the public, maybe higher value. And again, this is separate from one, which is support agriculture.
If it's separate than one, I think D is kind of
Space is just
redundant.
probably the agricultural.
Or are you suggesting just take it out because it's addressed in
Yeah,
one?
that's what I was saying. I think D is kind of redundant.
Okay. And then this was a policy that was listed previously, which is neighborhood open space should be an integral part of the neighborhood design. That remained from where I started on this part.
I don't know if it's redundant.
Okay.
It's, maybe it needs.
I mean, preserve, create, maybe we need to be more aggressive at creating.
Now, the only thing, it says usable open space, and as much as I believe agricultural fields are open space and valuable open space, if you go strictly with the definition of usable by the public, not so much for an agricultural field.
I can't use a pasture land, but I can use a park. And I think there should be a distinction made because we do spend so much time in point one talking about agricultural preservation, not so much on point two where we talk about what the public can then use and benefit from this.
Right, which is where the broader consensus is.
Right.
How about for number 2, change the first line to preserve and create quality, publicly usable open space?
I think that a person can use, I think Highland, they don't go use everyone's 2-acre fields, but they love the quality of the environment that it gives them, the It's the wording, just the way it makes them feel to see all
To
this
drive down
open
the road
space.
and just,
It certainly contributes to the aesthetic, but not really, it's not really usable. I can't go to my neighbor's pasture land without permission and have a picnic with my family. I love that it's there, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't meet the definition of usable.
All right, so my thoughts on this is that, it goes back to the question of, what is the purpose of agricultural preservation? And one of the things we identified is that pastoral environment or atmosphere. And so the thought was one, we're talking about, supporting agriculture as long as the farmer wants to do that. And then two, we're talking about open space word just left me, but recognizing that agricultural fields is one type of open space.
So in number one, we really focus on preserving agriculture. Here we're focusing on a different animal. We're focusing on something that isn't necessarily going to disappear. I mean, agricultural land can disappear and be turned into something else. If you have a park, go up to number 2, usable space. The natural areas tend to be protected, the parks are protected. Agricultural tourism isn't necessarily protected other than if it's a viable business, it's probably staying in business. And the neighborhood open space, again, like a neighborhood park. These are usable open public spaces that are probably going to be there in perpetuity. The agricultural space is not open to the public and may not be there in perpetuity. So I just differentiate between that and some.
Well, unless you zone it that way.
So 1 is agriculture,
What?
2 is open space.
That's what
3
they did in
is
Heber
residential.
too. They zoned it so that it would be open.
Well, from right now, I think we've covered agriculture in 1, and I don't want to diminish it. I think as we go forward, we're going to look for ways that the Agricultural Commission is going to come back with recommendations, including zoning or whatever, to protect and preserve our agricultural heritage. So I think we've got that base covered, I'm hoping.
Let's note this, and then we'll continue on. I do want to point out, the wording of this is preserve agricultural heritage and support agriculture. And that is, okay, so 3 gets into require healthy residential development patterns. Some of this comes from past discussion, some of these are fairly new proposals. Create a mix of housing types to accommodate various stages of life. Hopefully that's something that we at least understand what that means because of our past discussions. A range of housing types from single-family detached to, and again this is my proposal, multifamily is acceptable in Southwest Provo.
What does multifamily mean?
Multifamily, so single family can be detached and it can be attached. Examples of
Townhomes or single
townhomes,
family?
twin homes. Okay, multifamily gets into condos and apartments. Okay,
I'd like to strike that.
okay, noted. Okay, now keep that in scope, keep that in
You don't want
context.
townhouses, is what you're saying?
No. I don't want apartments or condominiums. I don't think we need stacked housing on the west side.
Okay, so let's,
I know. My nose is getting pretty high here, you might need to bring it
You're
down.
one of those, yeah.
So one thing to think about here is, you're not thinking just about the southwest area down the existing farmland. This southwest area plan is also on the west side, is going to address the commercial area where they want the grocery store. And frankly, I don't think you want to discourage, if somebody came in with a nice development that had some commercial stuff on the lower floor and some
It doesn't
apartments
work here.
above, it might not be a bad shopping area.
I put on Freedom Boulevard, the Arbors, those are empty businesses. You have tons of apartments up top, and those businesses are always empty. There used to be a great place there, it's gone.
Where are they?
It's on
It's
Freedom.
not the Arbors, it's the.
Oh, no, it's the-
It's the
Alpine Village.
Alpine Village.
Alpine Village. That model,
That's it.
that model works
Yeah.
great in
Somewhere like New York. It works great in large cities.
Also works in Daybreak.
Okay, we're not, still not daybreak though.
No, but all I'm saying is,
I
all I'm
don't-
saying
I've
is, you
seen
don't
that.
want to, I was saying is you maybe not want to recognize that there may be some value. And the developer's not likely to put it in there if they don't see some value in it.
That's noted, and I'm not saying by any means
Okay,
that this is
that's okay.
consensus, but let's go through the others and see, in context of the whole recommendation, see how that fits. Okay, C, the scale and style of residences should fit in with the surrounding area regardless of housing type.
We had a discussion, and I really liked the concept that was thrown out at that point. Not only fit in, but enhance the surrounding area. And I think there was some
I think that's
consensus
great.
around that too.
Okay.
It's not just fit in, but it's going to improve, it's going to build upon everything else.
And that's how
what's
you,
already there.
that's how you maintain the housing quality, the existing housing stock. And I think we've got to keep being sensitive to that so we don't create areas that don't have a reason to invest in.
So, follow-up, Phil, would you say that the project that we just gave a green light to in your neighborhood enhances?
The Allen Prince, absolutely, yeah. I think that's a prime example.
What's it like?
Scott's Corner.
I don't remember.
Quarter acre lots, base 4 per acre, 4 homes per acre.
But they're move-up homes, they're large.
Nicer homes.
Like square,
That's
is
what's
it square footage is designated or?
The square footage is larger than what's there in the overall area. They're a step up home from
I
a.
think 3,000 square feet,
Yeah.
two-story.
And do they designate like building materials, they have to be brick or?
That, there will be brick.
Yeah.
But, I mean, what was approved was we were just signaling that the council will be open to considering it as it goes through the regular process. It has not gone to the planning commission, it has not had its neighborhood meeting yet, it hasn't done any of these
They've
things.
been delayed so many times, I just want to say, is this really going to happen
Yeah.
or not? So
Yeah,
that's
right. The community development was saying, look, the planning, or the
It was conceptual.
community development was telling them that the council is not considering applications right now. And they said, well, we were here before you started doing the planning, so would the council be willing to hear? And so, to me, my vote was, yes, I'm willing to consider it, not that it's approved or any of that.
But yes, that's what I would say would be an enhancement to our neighborhood.
Right, okay. Housing types should be mixed without barriers separating types or densities.
So the fencing standards would be obsolete.
No, so are we more referring to not having gated communities? Aren't we more
But
referring?
that's a fencing standard.
Yeah, so we don't have a neighborhood full of duplexes in one neighborhood, contained neighborhood, and then single-family homes, and then this or that. And that I think would add to the overall mix.
But we're not saying, we're not saying we can't have a fence in your backyard.
Right.
I'm sorry, when I said that, I was meaning to gated communities
Yeah.
and blocking off sections of the neighborhood from other sections of the neighborhood.
But there are standards as far as walls when separating things like commercial and residential, I think.
And a lot of your mixed housing is going to have some designated, I mean, you're going to have parking, and it's going to be a lot different than single family next to it, so.
And the ideal
So
spot
I don't know about this definition, I think we need to be a little more clear.
What constitutes a barrier, you mean?
Yeah, what are the expectations? When
Context.
somebody reads this, what is the expectation?
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing you might be referring to here is in the overall picture, you want to maintain connectivity, right, Dave?
Yes. And again, we're not talking necessarily, no fences on people's backyards, but that no.
A common area within the
So
neighborhood.
maybe instead of saying without barriers separating, we should say something about maintaining connectivity of neighborhoods. I think that would be a more appropriate statement. If people still want to put fences around their homes, I mean, I have a 2-year-old, I don't want to run around all over the neighborhood without supervision.
I like that.
Okay.
I'm still struggling with consistency, except above on number B when we say multifamily is an option.
Mm-hmm.
So if we get a multifamily, I don't know how we
Okay.
do D to
And I'm scrambling to find an email that I sent. I think I sent it to you, Mr. Kenneth. Here's an example. I think this answers some of the questions like, what are you trying to get at? So in my last neighborhood, there were two properties side by side, and it just really stood out to me when I was thinking about this. One was a beautiful looking home. And I was talking with Bill Pepperoni, and he called it a mansion house, but it's a beautiful looking home. It fits right in with a single family detached, maybe a little bit larger, but it looks like it's just a nice house. I think it's kind of colonial. And you go in the front door and to kind of a small common area, but then there are four apartments there, and they are stacked, but it's a fourplex, but all within one building.
It's a style that's coming out to Brook, that should be coming out to Brockview Shores, I should say.
Should be coming out of Burke, okay? And then next to that is a triplex that I think it had a flat roof. It was like many, at least in my area, it was a triplex that was kind of turned on its side, so there's a long driveway and four houses, that were side by side there. From the street, from the curb appeal, it's like the side of a house, just in a flat roof. And to me, that stacked apartment was a beautiful addition, enhanced it, where that triplex turned on its side with the side and the gas meter sitting there out for everyone to see was a detriment, detracted, I should say, was detracted from the neighborhood. And so what we're saying in A or in B, if we say single family detached and attached, would accept the triplex and would prohibit the mansion home. Whereas if we leave it with multifamily, but then say the scale and style of the residence should fit in and enhance, and we shouldn't have these barriers. I'd like to explore the idea of apartments, but not as we do it in Provo, which is, these 5 acres or whatever is going to be, several apartment buildings kind of stacked in with parking all around it, and its own development versus something like the mansion house.
Where were they parking?
That area has alleyways, and so there's an alleyway with a parking lot in the back, and so it's not access from the front. But that's a different.
If I was a developer though, I think I mentioned this last time, to build one thing and build something completely different and then something completely different from that. It's really, what you're gonna open it up is individual lots, where you're gonna have every developer is gonna come in and wanna do something different. It's gonna be single lot subdivisions.
Okay, this is good. Let's get through the bottom of it, and then let's have these conversations. Maybe the cart's getting before the horse. I apologize.
And planning, the community development folks should be able to help us wordsmith that portion, because that barrier issue and stuff, they'll have ways to help define that for us.
Okay. Single-family detached and attached should be the predominant housing type, and use of other types should augment, not detract from the single-family feel of the area. Concentration. Sorry, I shouldn't highlight as I read. Concentrations of housing targeting a particular demographic and blocks of a single housing type should be avoided. And I think that actually kind of addresses
You mean like the boulders?
Or it could also be a 55-plus type of community you're talking about in that definition.
Yeah, we have to be careful with that. And this sounds a bit cheeky, and I don't mean to be, but we wouldn't want to preclude a commune of wealthy philanthropists from moving into a neighborhood. That's a single demographic, not likely to happen, but I think we need to be careful with that one.
But are we building housing designed for wealthy philanthropists?
Exactly. And that the point is made. What I think my neighbors would say strongly is yes, because we don't want another boulders in our neighborhood.
But aren't you, by saying this, if we wanted, I keep hearing we want to attract these young families in their neighborhoods. Isn't that a particular demographic that you just excluded by saying that?
Well, and what I'm suggesting with this is no, we would not say, okay, this area between 6th South and 11th South and here, this is going to be, this whole area is going to be designed for young professionals or young families, and then the move-up homes will be here. That's actually what I'm saying.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm just trying to figure out a practicality of young family, their second home they want to move into, wants at least 5 other neighbors or 10 other neighbors are like that to raise their kids with in that cul-de-sac or whatever. So I'm just, I catch what you're saying, but I'm just worried that we're a little bit more micro there than you're intending.
Well, and these are all proposals, but
Yeah.
I think having that little old lady who lives next door and it becomes your adopted grandma for your kids
I'm right with you on
is
it.
valuable as well. And so I think,
But his point, it really is hard to develop and create those as you're building them.
I'm also going to say something.
People aren't gonna like.
Shocking.
I know, right? I'm just a
get it all out.
I also think you probably need to take socioeconomics into a factor because people get uncomfortable around people grouped together in certain groups, like you're saying, young single families, one other young single families. When you get into a situation where your socioeconomics are vastly different, you don't have a neighborhood. People don't tend to come together.
And I can see,
And it's
I can
human
see,
nature, it's
I can
not-
see division lines when you have places like the Boulders and different things like that. But I think if it's not, if no one group is threatened because there's a large block of another group, then I think that it actually improves cohesiveness.
I think F is just a hard one, actually. I understand what you're trying to say.
Okay.
I think maybe planning give us some wordsmithing on it.
Okay.
But I think I think you're talking about, I think you can more go to the affirmative side of mixed utilization, mixed this and that. I think the negative side of that is problematic from the planning perspective.
Okay. And I also couched it in words like should be avoided, not, prohibited or whatever, but.
So, some time ago, and Becky will remember this, we had John Dester come and explain pocket neighborhoods. Now, that's a concept, it's a different variety of housing, we're looking for variety. Of course, where he happened to, it's relatively, all facing each other and.
Well, that's what I'm saying, if you don't want to create a demographic block, a pocket neighborhood is pretty contained in itself.
Yeah, well, a variety of lot sizes and homes, just a variety of housing is, I think what Dave is trying to say, rather than it's all going to be this here and this over here. But we saw that type of housing, and they had to go find someone that was willing to do that type of housing that had never done it in Provo. So John Dester became the spokesperson. And so whatever kind of housing model we think is going to be the best for social demographics in a functional neighborhood, you've got to find somebody willing to build it. Whether it's a Daybreak or whether we come up with something brand new. Because typically builders are used to building whatever it is they've been building before. And I don't know, Kay, what do you think?
I think Daybreak is an interesting thing because you have a developer who's not the builder. And this developer works with multiple builders, and the builders build, one here, one here, one here, one here, one here. And then different builders build next to that. And so you have one developer, but multiple builders.
Right. And as much as we talk Daybreak, have you been to Daybreak for house? Daybreak got I was there Thanksgiving time with my niece who was bought a place. She's never felt more at home as a townhouse. She talked about how great and how phenomenal it is. There's a lot to learn from Daybreak.
Yeah, I've heard some lot of neighbors about Daybreak lately.
I've been there a lot. I visit lots of different things. I eat restaurants or the whole bit. There's still a lot to learn from the concept.
I could tell you from all the people I've known that live in Daybreak, and I know very few that have moved out of there except for having to move for work. What I can tell you is the only complaint I've really heard from people is they don't like the HOA fees. And that's from probably 100 people I know that live in the area.
I'm going to come back to the developers just real quick. Quick anecdote, I think the developers may be a little bit more flexible, because there was a developer that came to me that wanted to build in our neighborhood just recently, and I told him he wanted to do rows and rows of townhomes. I said, we're not looking for rows and rows of townhomes, we're looking for more family homes. And so
he came back with a concept to me of a particular type of townhomes that look like single family in the front with three in the back, across the street from a row of single family houses. So I think some developers would be more willing to be flexible that way, not maybe the apartment complex and then mansion home next to it, but more willing to do like single family residence and townhomes together.
Great. Now, that would be a good time for, let me throw out one other thing, that when we look at those policies that we talked about earlier about encouraging infill in the city rather than, before converting more agricultural land and whatnot, and the logical development and whatnot. To do that, I think there's a couple ways to do that. One, we can create kind of these artificial things and say, well, we won't allow any development here for the next 5 years, and then 10 years for this over here. I mean, we can do that artificially, or we can set high bar for, if development is coming, it needs to meet these things. Maybe it needs to be this mixed housing, and you're going to have 9 out of 10 developers throw up their hands and say, well, I don't want to do that. That's not my model of business. And what that has an effect is that it pushes it a little bit more to that infill, that pushes it more to the orderly. It just slows things down, and then when we get the development, we get higher quality development that is required by our high bar. This is a graphic that we saw a year ago now at our zoning summit. This is denser than I think anywhere that we would see on the west side, but it is an example of single-family detached. This one might be that fourplex, but stacked apartments. This one, here's your townhomes. There's 3 in a row that are all attached together. Here's what would be similar to that pocket neighborhood, and there are 6 units here. And then here's a large home, multi-generational, and somewhere near the center is a corner shop. So I'm just trying to kind of paint a picture for what I was trying to capture in these objectives. So let's flag F. Let's go on to G. We're really running out of time. Okay, corridors. We use design corridors in different places. I think we should consider design corridors. But we're not going to have time for all of this. I do want to kind of give the rest of the flavor. This is acting upon me again. Commercial, and I think most of this was already in the thing that we looked at before, but I think we picked up some of the things that we talked about after it was proposed. 5, transportation network, and I think, again, this is going to be something that may slow down developments because it may be trickier to get the land that's necessary to provide that road network if it says, the road needs to be here in order to provide connectivity and integration with the rest of the west side. But if somebody's living on that plot, well, it won't develop until that person chooses to sell. So that could really slow things down.
So in the downtown, we have grid pattern and blocks are roughly 4 acres.
4 acres inside a block.
And you're looking at larger 10 acre.
This calls for 10-acre blocks, which are on the scale of Salt Lake. The difference though is the idea is those 10-acre blocks, and you would have the grid roads on the outside, but then inside this 10 acres, maybe the developer says, well, it would make sense to have 2 cul-de-sacs, or they could design the roads inside, and these would be smaller roads, any way that makes the most sense for the development, but you get your connectivity because outside of that block are
With the density we're talking about, need an emphasis on grids? I'm not a fan of the grid life for most of our newer neighborhoods. And like the
Rhythm would be so disappointed.
What's that? I'm just, yeah.
Be careful how you talk.
Well, where's Brigham right now? Yeah. But I'm kind of glad that my road curves a little bit. And so I'm not sure, could be convinced rather easily that we ought to be designing. I understand the logic of it, but I don't understand why that would be a priority at all.
Okay. Okay, excellent, we'll flag, and all of, none of this is
Especially
really.
when we're small.
Yeah.
If we had a daybreak situation where we had thousands, I don't know how many thousands of acres they have, but that's easier to.
So, I remember, I lived 12 years in Mazer and some time in Joaquin, and what I like about the grid is the more ways you have to get where you want to go, the less any one of them is overloaded with traffic. And I think there's also something to be said for having some logical way to get from point A to point B. You go to some communities and you say, oh, I can't get here from here to there because they didn't have any kind of planning with the roads.
Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia.
I live in Indian Hills, and I get along just fine, and our streets aren't straight, and I don't, if they want to not have straight streets, I don't
Well,
mind if they
he's
don't
not
have
saying they
them.
necessarily have to be straight streets, it's just that at the 10-acre lines is what how I'm reading this is at the 10 acre.
Inside might be curved and.
You have some significant, when you look at the maps,
You already
you
have
have some
6
significant
south.
blocks between, for example, a typical one would be, let's see what I get right here, 600 South to Center Street, so six blocks long and just like 4 or 5 wide, right?
So I also know they turn the oxen around the middle of the street, so, and those are great plans back before, but I don't need to now.
So between.
Well, you might want to, just in case we want to put
I
monorail.
agree. That's what we did.
Between those collector roads is roughly 100 acres. And so the idea would be to break up that 100 acres into 9, roughly 10-acre blocks. And the roads take up some space. And then inside those 10-acre blocks, the roads could be whatever makes sense for the
Well,
development.
if I understand what you said, right now, if you say a block is about 4
Yeah, that's
acres,
four.
12 blocks would be 4, or 12 acres would be about 4 current blocks. So you're not talking a huge amount of space in 10
There's not
acres.
as much space out there.
If I,
Right, right.
4 blocks right there, that's 12 acres right there.
Or, right, 16.
To me, it just narrows your vision of what you can accomplish.
Okay, and again, we don't have time to really dive into this, we're actually past the 6:30 mark, if that clock is right, but the sixth one talks about, specifically about the sequencing of development. And all of these, I'm not brushing over these things, I want to present all of this. So here's the 10-acre block, saying that this would be the smallest unit to be considered for rezoning. And so there was some thought of, well, developers are going to be developing, property by property. But this is basically saying that this 10-acre block needs to be done, together. And so that would give kind of that, the ability to develop more than just one single plot. These 10 acres would be developed together, would be rezoned all together. Infrastructure would need to be put in together. And C gets to the sequencing where it says a 10-acre block will only be considered for rezoning if it's adjacent to a non-agriculturally zoned block. And that just kind of tries to avoid flooding.
Not only that, they try to put utility lines and stuff across the farmer's field, and they can't have, it destroys it.
How big is it Osprey, is that what it's called?
Osprey
It's one
Point?
that's going in right now?
Yeah.
You know how big that is?
How many homes you mean?
How many acres?
I don't know, Harry, how many acres is it? It's 110 homes.
Did that have to abide by that?
25, 26, something.
Where is it?
Right there.
Osprey Point?
All
Goes
those,
south.
so the 1100 west to 1560, and
1560,
then
okay.
760
It's south of
west, that,
1560.
for up to 1150, that block right there. Isn't that?
Yeah, that's right.
No, that's not
Yeah.
what I wanted.
Do you
Sorry,
know
I can't see
the
it.
GIS has a subdivision layer?
Yeah.
GIS is
GIS home.pro.
It's right here, and
Okay.
it butts up against that subdivision right there. All these dead-end streets now continue, well, these are cul-de-sacs, but then the dead-end streets will
Some of
continue.
them go through, some of them don't.
Well, these are cul-de-sacs. cul-de-sac, cul-de-sac, through street, cul-de-sac, through street.
Oh, okay, so it was down.
It goes all the way down to the dike, south. It goes all the way down to the dike.
This would
It's,
require.
yeah, you can log in with you.
Well, I see the ghost of the image behind, so.
Rename.
Yeah. 1830 south, whatever it is. Between University.
And then if you go to the 4 squares at the
Continue into
top,
the parkway through there.
Okay.
or the top right.
The
The,
road is
actually,
right
the
there.
north, that one.
But David,
And then there's a second entrance later.
the neighbor right behind me, they have to go clear up and around to, I'm almost at Third West, they have to go clear up to Fourth and
Stacy
then over
Dunn.
to East their house.
Clear east.
There is.
Okay.
Parkway comes
Do you see what
right.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
So to get a ball in the backyard, either climb over the fence or
It's
what.
1830.
Around the neighborhood.
Right now you have a sign.
And I'm not even touching it.
Other side of the freeway.
Look, no hands, I'm not doing it.
Okay, go down and over.
Yeah,
Over there.
I'll tell Dave.
That makes sense.
Do something.
So it's that over there?
Further west.
I agree.
Oh, further west.
Well, it's a little bit less, right? Where's that?
Just
It's
right
not-
there,
it's right here?
yes. No. it-
Oh, is that?
Yes,
subdivision?
but Osprey Point right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be it, you're right.
Dave's raised it.
Not the
Okay.
existing.
Okay, we are past 6:30, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, we definitely, that's on time. So let's close for today. But that at least introduces that proposal. Obviously, there's things that we still have disagreements on. And we haven't really talked about, reasons why on some of these things. So, so we will move to adjourn, and I don't know if people are interested in communicating via email. Was it helpful to have these documents put out
Yeah.
over the break? Okay.
I'll respond to you next time, I apologize.
Okay, no, it's fine. I don't take it personally, but it's like, wow, I sure hope it went out. I hope people got it. 'Cause, yeah.
So if I may, I think you made progress tonight.
Yes.
Believe it or not, I think you made progress.
You want people to comment, if we have things that we weren't able to say in this meeting, do we want to send them to you?
Can we see if we can engage Karen to put these documents on Open City Hall in a private group and see if we can forward this discussion a little bit more that way. Okay, let's do that. And look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all right.
Two weeks.
Nice decision.
Yeah.
Made the decision good.
Actually, I think we
We'll
need
meet.
decisions.
On the 24th. Thanks, everyone.
I like it. I think it's just like, how do you do it? And make the parcels together smaller, so we make it smaller.
Doesn't kill. Direction. They get off the freeway, they got like the part of the